Give me one call before you decide what goes into that report. Renee Walker stood beside a marked patrol vehicle at 8:47 on a cold Arlington morning, her hands secured behind her and her posture perfectly straight. Sergeant Daniel Cross held her telephone in one hand and a small leather case in the other. Officer Emily Hart stood near the entrance of the Potomac Defense Leadership Center, watching military families pass through the glass doors without understanding why the woman outside was being kept from joining them. 13 minutes remained before the keynote address was scheduled to begin. Inside, hundreds of guests were taking their seats. Outside, Daniel told Renee that another argument would be documented as further obstruction. Renee looked directly at the body-worn camera attached to his uniform. Its small indicator light was still glowing. "I am not arguing," she said. "I am asking you to verify my identity before you create a permanent record based on an assumption." Daniel gave a quiet laugh. He had already decided that her calm voice was rehearsed, that her formal clothing was part of an act, and that the military invitation in her case belonged to someone else. Emily had seen the name printed across the top of the document, but she remained silent. A security camera above the loading entrance recorded the three of them from less than 30 feet away. Across the courtyard, a teenage student named Noah Mitchell held his telephone at chest level, recording from behind a row of stone planters. Renee noticed every camera. She also noticed the clock visible through the lobby window. 12 minutes remained. Her own telephone rang in Daniel's hand. The screen showed another call from Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale. Daniel silenced it without answering. "That is the third call from the same person," Renee said. "You should speak with him." Daniel placed the telephone on the hood of the patrol vehicle. "You do not get to direct this investigation." Renee met his eyes. "Then conduct one." For the first time, Emily looked uncomfortable. She quietly suggested that they contact the event staff, but Daniel dismissed the idea. He said the woman had already been given enough opportunities to cooperate. Renee turned slightly toward the glass entrance, where an event coordinator was speaking urgently into a telephone. 11 minutes remained. Daniel opened his field notebook and began writing. He described Renee as evasive, confrontational, and unwilling to follow instructions. She listened without interrupting. When he finished the first sentence, she spoke again. "Please record that I provided my driver's license, my invitation, and the telephone number for the event coordinator." Daniel stopped writing. "You can explain all of that later." Renee looked at the body-worn camera once more. The truth should not have to wait until later. Daniel picked up her telephone and held it toward her with an amused expression. "Fine. One call. Let us hear who is supposed to rescue you." Renee calmly gave him a number and asked him to place the call on speaker. The line connected almost immediately. A steady voice answered from the other end. "Army Operations Center at the Pentagon. State your name and status." 27 minutes earlier, Renee Walker turned her black Lincoln into the circular drive of the Potomac Defense Leadership Center, less than 3 miles from the Pentagon. The morning sky above Arlington was pale and clear, and a cold wind moved the American flags along the entrance walkway. Renee wore a dark navy blazer over a cream blouse, black trousers, and low leather shoes. Nothing about her appearance announced the rank she carried. That was intentional. She had spent nearly 3 decades in the United States Army learning that authority did not need decoration to exist. On the passenger seat rested a brown leather case containing her prepared remarks, a printed event credential, and a formal invitation addressed to Major General Renee Walker. Beside them lay an old military challenge coin that had belonged to her father, along with a handwritten letter from 13-year-old Ava Collins, whose mother was serving overseas. Ava had written that she wanted to become an aerospace engineer but sometimes felt guilty for dreaming about the future while her mother was so far from home. Renee had placed the letter on top of her speech because it reminded her why the morning mattered. She parked in a reserved guest space near the eastern entrance, checked the time, and stepped into the wind. 23 minutes remained before her address. Families were already moving through the main doors, carrying programs and cups of coffee. Renee could have called Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale and asked him to meet her outside, but she had told him to remain with the students. She wanted the scholarship recipients to feel that the day belonged to them, not to the officials attending the ceremony. Before entering, Renee stopped near a low memorial wall honoring service members from Northern Virginia. Several small flags had been placed beneath engraved names. She stood there quietly, then took one photograph to send to her younger sister. Across the driveway, a contract security employee named Thomas Reed watched from a small reception station. He had not received the updated guest list, and from where he stood, he saw only a black woman in civilian clothing photographing a memorial near a controlled entrance. He did not approach her. He did not ask whether she needed assistance. Instead, he called the non-emergency police line and described a suspicious woman taking pictures near a restricted area. Renee heard none of it. She returned her telephone to her coat pocket and walked toward the glass doors. Before she reached them, a marked patrol vehicle entered the drive and stopped at an angle near the curb. Sergeant Daniel Cross stepped out first. Officer Emily Hart followed from the passenger side. Renee paused, assuming they were assigned to event security. Daniel looked at her, then at the memorial wall behind her. He did not greet her. He pointed toward the public sidewalk and said, "You need to leave this area." Renee glanced at the entrance, then back at him. "I am attending the scholarship ceremony." Daniel moved closer, his expression already settled. "This entrance is for authorized guests." Renee reached slowly into her leather case and removed the invitation bearing her full name. "Then verification should take less than a minute," she said. Daniel took the invitation without asking permission and held it beneath the morning light. The heavy paper carried the seal of the Potomac Defense Leadership Center, the date of the ceremony, and the name Major General Renee Walker printed above the words "Keynote Address." He read the title twice, then looked at Renee as though the document had created more suspicion instead of less. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Renee kept her voice level. "It was delivered to my office." Daniel gave a humorless smile. "That was not my question." Officer Emily Hart moved closer and studied the invitation over his shoulder. The printing appeared professional. The event date matched the signs posted near the entrance. Renee's name matched the visitor schedule displayed on a clipboard inside the security station, though Emily could only see part of the page through the glass. She said nothing. Daniel asked Renee for identification. She reached slowly into the inner pocket of her blazer and handed him her Virginia driver's license. The photograph matched her face. The name matched the invitation. The address was less than 5 miles away. Daniel examined both items, then asked why a military general would arrive alone, without a uniform, an escort, or a government vehicle. Renee looked toward the families entering the building. "Because I am here to speak to students, not to stage an arrival." Daniel turned the license over in his hand. "Important people usually have someone expecting them." "Someone is expecting me," Renee replied. "You can call the number on the invitation." The answer was simple, but Daniel heard challenge in it. He told Emily to check the vehicle. She walked toward the black Lincoln and looked through the windshield. A reserved keynote speaker permit rested clearly on the dashboard. Beside it was a printed program with Renee's photograph near the top. Emily leaned closer. The image showed the same woman standing 10 feet behind her. For a moment, her expression changed. Then Daniel called her name, and she stepped away without mentioning what she had seen. Renee's telephone began ringing inside her coat pocket. She glanced at the screen before answering. "Lieutenant." Colonel Marcus Hale was calling. Daniel noticed the military title displayed above the number. "Do not answer that yet," he said. Renee lowered the telephone but did not put it away. "That is my aide. He can confirm why I am here." Daniel extended his hand. "Give me the telephone." Renee looked at him steadily. "You have my license, my invitation, and a direct verification number. My telephone is not required to confirm my identity." A cold gust moved across the courtyard, lifting the edge of her blazer and scattering several ceremony programs from a nearby table. 18 minutes remained before her address. Inside the lobby, Olivia Grant checked the entrance for the third time, wondering why the keynote speaker had not arrived. Outside, Daniel's body-worn camera recorded Renee standing still, speaking clearly, and offering every reasonable path to verification. Yet when he raised his radio, his description told a different story. "We have a woman near the restricted entrance presenting questionable military credentials," he said. "She is refusing instructions and may be attempting to gain unauthorized access." Renee listened to him replace facts with suspicion. When he finished, she asked one question. "Did you tell dispatch that the name on my identification matches the invitation?" Daniel lowered the radio. His eyes hardened. "You need to stop telling me how to do my job." Daniel stepped closer and pointed toward the brown leather case hanging from Renee's hand. "Open it," he said. Renee did not move. "What legal basis do you have to search my property?" The question was calm, precise, and impossible to mistake. Daniel treated it as defiance anyway. "Your behavior is giving me enough reason." Renee looked at the body-worn camera on his uniform. "My behavior has been to provide identification, an invitation, and a contact number." Emily stood near the black Lincoln, close enough to see the keynote speaker permit through the windshield. Renee's telephone rang again. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale appeared on the screen for a second time. Daniel reached for the telephone, but Renee held it close to her side. "He is waiting for me inside," she said. "Let me answer, and this ends immediately." Daniel shook his head. "You are not in control of this encounter." Renee glanced toward the glass doors, where Olivia Grant was now speaking urgently with another event coordinator. 16 minutes remained before the program began. "Then answer one question," Renee said. "Am I being detained, or am I free to enter the building?" Daniel's expression tightened. He had expected apology, nervousness, or confusion. Her request for clarity made him feel as though his authority was being examined. "You need to stop talking back." Renee held his gaze. "Asking for the legal basis is not disrespect." The courtyard seemed to grow quieter. Several guests slowed near the entrance. A teenage student in a Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps uniform, Noah Mitchell, stood beside a stone planter and watched from about 30 feet away. His telephone remained at his side, but his attention did not leave Renee. Daniel ordered Emily to take the telephone. Emily hesitated long enough to see another message appear from Olivia Grant asking where the keynote speaker was. She also saw the military title beside Marcus Hale's name. For one brief moment, she could have changed the direction of the morning. Instead, she held out her hand. Renee looked at her. "You have seen enough to verify me." Emily answered quietly, "Please give me the telephone." Renee placed it in her hand without argument. Daniel interpreted cooperation as another victory. He told Renee to set the leather case on the hood of the patrol vehicle. She complied, keeping every movement slow and visible. He asked again for permission to open it. She refused again. Not without consent, a warrant, or a lawful basis. Daniel turned to Emily. "She is obstructing identification." Emily looked down at Renee's driver's license still resting in Daniel's hand. The identification process had already been completed, but she did not say so. 14 minutes remained. Daniel informed Renee that she was being temporarily detained while they investigated possible misuse of military credentials. Renee asked him to state the specific conduct that justified the detention. His answer was immediate. "Your attitude, your refusal to cooperate, and your continued interference." Renee's voice remained steady. "You are describing questions as misconduct." Daniel instructed her to turn toward the patrol vehicle and place her hands behind her. She did so without resistance. The handcuffs closed with a quiet metallic sound. No one in the courtyard spoke. Noah lifted his telephone and began recording. Emily looked toward the entrance as Olivia Grant appeared behind the glass, searching the driveway with growing concern. Renee stood upright beside the patrol vehicle, her face composed, her eyes fixed on the body-worn camera. "Record this clearly," she said. "I gave you my identification. I offered direct verification. I did not threaten you, and I did not resist." Daniel opened his field notebook. "Keep talking," he replied. "Every word is going into the report." Renee looked at the clock inside the lobby. 13 minutes remained. "Then make sure the truth goes in with it." Daniel wrote quickly, turning each calm response into a darker version of itself. He described Renee as aggressive, evasive, and unwilling to follow lawful instructions. He added that she might be impersonating military personnel and attempting to enter a restricted federal event under false pretenses. Renee listened as the official story formed before the investigation had even begun. "Read my full name to dispatch," she said. Daniel did not look up. "You do not control what I report." "Then report the evidence," Renee replied. "My name is on the license, the invitation, the parking permit, and the program inside my vehicle." Daniel pressed his pen harder against the paper. His body-worn camera recorded her steady voice, visible hands, and complete lack of resistance. Above the eastern entrance, security camera C12 captured the patrol vehicle, Renee's black Lincoln, and the keynote speaker permit displayed behind the windshield. 30 feet away, Noah Mitchell held his telephone at chest level and recorded continuously. 3 cameras were preserving one story while Daniel prepared another. 12 minutes remained before the ceremony. Emily stood beside the hood with Renee's telephone and invitation. She opened the folded program again. Beneath a photograph matching Renee's face, the printed line read Major General Renee Walker, keynote address. Emily looked from the page to the woman standing in handcuffs. Her uncertainty was no longer private. It showed in the way she avoided Daniel's eyes. Renee noticed. "You have confirmed who I am," she said. Emily lowered the program. "We still have to follow procedure." Renee's expression did not change. "Procedure requires verification, not silence." The telephone vibrated in Emily's hand. A message preview from Olivia Grant appeared, asking why General Walker had not entered the building. Emily turned the screen away before Daniel could see it. That choice lasted only a second, but camera C12 recorded it clearly. Daniel raised his radio and contacted dispatch again. "Unknown female remains detained," he said. "She claims high military authority and refuses to cooperate with identification." Renee looked directly at his body-worn camera. "My identification is in your hand." Daniel ignored her. Dispatch asked whether the detained woman had provided a name. He paused, then answered, "Not independently verified." He never said Renee Walker. He never mentioned the invitation. He never mentioned the keynote permit. Inside the lobby, Olivia Grant called Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale and told him the keynote speaker had arrived but appeared to be stopped outside. Marcus left the auditorium immediately. 11 minutes remained. Noah moved several feet closer while staying behind the stone planter. Daniel noticed the telephone and ordered him to stop interfering. Noah answered that he was standing in a public courtyard and was not approaching anyone. Renee gave him a brief look that carried both gratitude and warning. "Keep recording, but stay safe." Daniel returned to his notebook. He had the handcuffs, the radio, and the first version of the report. In his mind, that meant he controlled the truth. Then Emily placed the program beside him and spoke so quietly that only the body-worn camera clearly captured her words. "Daniel, her name and photograph are printed here. The event coordinator is asking for General Walker." Daniel looked at the program, then at Renee. For one brief moment, the facts were complete. He could have ended the detention. Instead, he closed the program and said, "Anyone could have obtained this." Renee watched the decision settle across his face. He no longer believed she was lying. He was protecting the report he had already started. 10 minutes remained. Her telephone rang again, and this time the screen displayed Army Operations Center. Renee turned toward Daniel. You wanted independent verification, she said. Answer it. Emily looked at the glowing screen, then at Daniel. The call continued vibrating in her hand until he finally took the telephone and pressed the speaker button. This is Sergeant Daniel Cross, he said. Who is calling? A measured male voice answered without hesitation. Colonel James Whitaker, Army Operations Center at the Pentagon. I need to speak with Major General Renee Walker. The courtyard fell silent again. Daniel glanced at Renee, but his expression remained guarded. The woman here is being detained while we verify her identity. Whitaker's tone did not change. Then place the telephone near General Walker. Daniel held it several feet away, as though distance could reduce the authority in the voice. Renee spoke clearly. Colonel Whitaker, this is Major General Renee Walker. I am outside the eastern entrance of the Potomac Defense Leadership Center in Arlington. I have been detained by Sergeant Daniel Cross and Officer Emily Hart after providing my driver's license, event invitation, and keynote credential. Please verify my identity through the appropriate local channel and request preservation of all recorded communications. Whitaker paused only long enough to write. Understood, General. Are you injured or in immediate danger? No, Renee answered. There has been no physical resistance. The issue is unlawful detention and inaccurate reporting. Daniel shifted his weight. He had expected anger, confusion, or a desperate performance. Instead, Renee sounded like someone delivering an operational summary. Whitaker asked Daniel for his badge number. Daniel gave it with a faint smile, convinced that the caller was part of the deception. Whitaker then requested Emily's badge number, the patrol vehicle identification, the dispatch channel, and the exact time the detention began. Emily provided the information more quietly. The confidence she had borrowed from Daniel was beginning to disappear. 9 minutes remained before the keynote address. Through the glass doors, Olivia Grant saw Renee beside the patrol vehicle and raised a hand to her mouth. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale appeared behind her in uniform, followed by 2 members of the event staff. Whitaker spoke again. Sergeant Cross, do not alter your field notes. Do not deactivate either body-worn camera. Preserve all dispatch recordings, telephone communications, and security footage connected to this encounter. Daniel laughed once. You are not in a position to give orders to this department. I am not directing your department, Whitaker replied. I am notifying you that the United States Army has initiated formal identity verification for a serving Major General and requested preservation of relevant evidence. Renee watched Daniel's face. The facts were no longer distant. They had reached him through the telephone he had expected to expose her. Still, he refused to release her. Anyone can claim to be calling from the Pentagon, he said. Whitaker answered calmly. Your dispatch center will receive confirmation through an authenticated government channel. Daniel lowered the telephone and looked at Emily. We wait for local verification. Renee nodded once. That is what I requested from the beginning. 8 minutes remained. Daniel tried to end the call, but Whitaker asked to speak with Renee one final time. General Walker, remain where you are. Your command has been notified, and Lieutenant Colonel Hale is approaching your location. Daniel looked toward the entrance and saw the uniformed officer moving quickly across the lobby. For the first time that morning, his hand stopped above the notebook. Then his radio activated. Dispatch requested the full name of the woman he had detained. Daniel stared at Renee's driver's license, the invitation, and the program carrying the same name. He could know. Longer call her unknown. 7 minutes remained as he lifted the radio and finally said, Renee Walker. Dispatch repeated the name through Daniel's radio. Renee Walker is confirmed as an active duty Major General in the United States Army. Pentagon security has authenticated the request. Release her immediately and preserve all recordings. The words crossed the courtyard with nowhere to hide. Daniel stared at the radio as though the device had betrayed him. Emily looked at Renee, then at the handcuffs, and finally at the program she had already read twice. The truth had not changed. Only their ability to deny it had disappeared. 6 minutes remained before the keynote address. Daniel raised the radio again and asked dispatch to repeat the confirmation. The answer came back even more clearly. Major General Renee Walker is the scheduled keynote speaker at the Potomac Defense Leadership Center. Command personnel are approaching your location. The eastern doors opened before Daniel could respond. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale crossed the courtyard in full uniform, followed by Olivia Grant and Police Chief Laura Bennett. Marcus did not look toward the patrol vehicle first. His attention went directly to Renee. "General Walker," he said, stopping several feet away, "the auditorium is standing by for you." Daniel's field notebook slipped slightly in his hand. Emily reached for the handcuff key, but Renee spoke before she moved. "Keep both body-worn cameras active." Chief Bennett nodded. "They will remain active." Emily unlocked the handcuffs and stepped back. Renee brought her hands forward slowly, then adjusted the sleeves of her blazer. She did not glare at either officer. She did not demand an apology. She simply asked for her driver's license, invitation, telephone, and leather case. Daniel returned them one at a time without meeting her eyes. Olivia checked the contents of the case and confirmed the speech, event credential, challenge coin, and Ava Collins's letter were still inside. Marcus turned toward Daniel. "What information led you to detain her?" Daniel began explaining that Renee had refused instructions and challenged his authority. Chief Bennett interrupted him. "Did her identification match the invitation?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes." "Did the vehicle display the keynote permit?" Emily answered quietly. "Yes." "Did event staff attempt to contact her?" Emily looked at the telephone in Renee's hand. "Several times." Bennett's expression hardened. "Then stop explaining. Preserve your notes exactly as written." 5 minutes remained. Through the glass entrance, guests had begun turning toward the courtyard. They could see Marcus standing beside Renee and the police chief separating the officers from the encounter. Renee looked at Noah Mitchell, who still held his telephone at chest level. "Keep the original recording," she told him. "Do not edit it or post it until investigators request a copy." Noah nodded. Chief Bennett ordered Daniel and Emily to wait beside their patrol vehicle under a supervisor's direction. Renee entered the building with Marcus and Olivia. As the doors opened, the master of ceremonies stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, Major General Renee Walker." Hundreds of guests rose together. The applause filled the lobby and reached the courtyard outside. Daniel stood beneath the cold morning light, holding the report that described her as an unknown woman. Inside, Renee walked toward the stage without looking back. Her rank had forced the system to listen, but her composure had already revealed the greater authority. The officers had spent 20 minutes demanding that she prove she belonged. Now an entire room was standing because it had been waiting for her. Renee reached the podium with 4 minutes remaining on the original schedule. She placed Ava Collins's letter beside her prepared remarks and waited until the applause faded. No one inside the auditorium knew every detail of what had happened outside, and Renee did not use the stage to embarrass Daniel or Emily. She spoke instead about leadership under pressure, the danger of confusing authority with wisdom, and the responsibility to examine facts before turning assumptions into decisions. "Discipline is not the power to control another person," she told the students. "It is the ability to control yourself when fear, pride, or anger offers an easier answer." In the front row, Ava listened with her mother's photograph resting inside the program on her lap. Renee reminded the scholarship recipients that dignity did not depend on a title, uniform, or powerful connection. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a different reason than the courtyard had been. After the ceremony, Chief Laura Bennett escorted Renee, Marcus Hale, Olivia Grant, and Noah Mitchell to a private conference room near the administrative offices. Daniel and Emily remained outside under separate supervision. Bennett asked Renee whether she wanted both officers suspended immediately. Renee placed her leather case on the table and answered carefully. "Follow department policy." Do not protect them, and do not punish them for public theater. Preserve the evidence and let it speak. Bennett opened a formal incident log. Renee identified each source in order. Daniel's body-worn camera had recorded the original conversation. Emily's camera had captured the invitation, program, telephone notifications, and her private warning to Daniel. Security camera C12 had shown the keynote permit in Renee's vehicle and Emily turning the message screen away. Noah's telephone contained an uninterrupted recording from the moment the handcuffs were applied. Dispatch held the radio traffic in which Daniel repeatedly called Renee unknown while holding identification bearing her name. The Pentagon call had been logged through an authenticated government channel. Renee also requested that Daniel's field notebook be sealed before he could revise a single sentence. Chief Bennett agreed and instructed a supervisor to collect it immediately. She ordered both officers to submit separate statements before viewing any video or speaking with each other. Noah transferred an original copy of his recording to an evidence specialist and kept the source file on his telephone. Olivia provided the event schedule, guest list, call history, an email showing that Renee's name, photograph, vehicle, and arrival time had been supplied to security personnel the previous evening. Marcus asked whether Renee wanted the Army to issue a public statement. She shook her head. Not until the facts are complete. Then she looked at Bennett. This investigation cannot become important only because I am a general. Review earlier complaints involving the same language, especially aggressive, uncooperative, and talking back. Find out whether those words replaced evidence in other reports. Bennett understood the weight of the request. Renee's rank had brought immediate attention, but she was using that attention to ask what happened to people who had no Pentagon number to call. Outside the conference room, Daniel stared at the closed cover of his confiscated notebook. Emily sat several chairs away, realizing that silence had become part of the record. Renee could have demanded instant revenge. Instead, she demanded something more difficult, a process honest enough to protect even the people who had denied her one. 6 weeks later, the Independent Review Board completed its investigation. The findings did not depend on Renee's rank, the attention from the Pentagon, or the public embarrassment of the department. They depended on records. Daniel's body-worn camera showed that Renee had provided valid identification, a matching invitation, and a direct method of verification before he described her as evasive. Emily's camera showed that she had seen the keynote program, the vehicle permit, and messages identifying Renee as General Walker. Security camera C12 confirmed that neither officer faced threatening behavior or physical resistance. Dispatch recordings proved that Daniel repeatedly called Renee an unknown woman while holding documents bearing her full name. His field notebook contained conclusions written before he completed any verification, and his final report repeated statements contradicted by the recordings. Emily's written account claimed that she had not seen clear evidence of Renee's identity until after the Pentagon call. Her own camera proved otherwise. The review then expanded to earlier complaints. Investigators found several encounters in which Daniel had used the words aggressive, uncooperative, and talking back to describe people whose recorded behavior remained calm. Some complaints had been dismissed because supervisors trusted the reports without reviewing the full recordings. Emily had signed supporting statements in 2 of those cases even when her body-worn camera showed important facts had been omitted. The board concluded that Daniel had detained Renee without sufficient legal basis, failed to complete reasonable verification, and submitted materially false information. His employment was terminated, and his record was sent to the state agency responsible for law enforcement certification. Emily was also terminated for assisting the unlawful detention, withholding evidence that could have ended it, and submitting an inaccurate statement during the investigation. The careers did not end because one powerful woman made a call. They ended because that call prevented the evidence from disappearing beneath official language. Chief Laura Bennett announced new department rules. Officers would document every refused verification opportunity. Body-worn camera recordings would be secured before final reports were completed in disputed encounters. Supervisors would review the facts behind labels such as aggressive or uncooperative instead of accepting those words as evidence. Older complaints connected to Daniel and Emily were reopened, and several former complainants were invited to provide new statements. Renee declined interviews that treated the incident as a story about military privilege. "My rank brought immediate attention," she said. "Justice means building a system that listens just as carefully when the person has no rank at all." 3 months later, Renee returned to the Potomac Defense Leadership Center for a student leadership workshop. Ava Collins met her near the memorial wall with a folder of aerospace engineering designs. The girl said she remembered Renee's words about discipline and had written them above her desk. Renee asked what discipline meant to her now. Ava answered, "Doing what is right before anyone important is watching." Renee smiled and looked toward the eastern entrance, where security staff were carefully checking every guest against the verified list. The morning was quiet. No crowd was waiting for a revelation. No title needed to be announced. Daniel and Emily had believed one telephone call would prove who Renee was. In the end, it proved something else. Her authority had opened the door, but their own recordings had closed their careers. Renee's stars did not create her dignity. They only exposed the people who had refused to see it until the Pentagon answered.